So welcome everyone to this breakout session. I hope you're enjoying your day at Africa tomorrow. It's been great for me so far. So yeah, absolutely do check out Simple Flying, but we're not here to talk about me. We're here to talk about coronavirus, sadly, but specifically what our airlines are doing. Whether it's enough and what, if any, of these things are going to be staying with us in the long term. So to kind of set the scene, obviously the reaction to COVID around the world in terms of aviation has been very varied. A lot of passengers do realise that travelling by plane is one of the safest modes of transport. And nowadays we seem to all know about HEPA filters and electrostatic spraying and all these things that we never heard of before. And the issue is passenger confidence, and also that we're doing enough as airlines to keep them safe. So some airlines believe blocking the middle seat is the answer. A lot of airlines agree that this isn't sustainable long term. Some believe it's about PPE, mandating masks on board. Some airlines like Qatar are even going a step further and implementing full face shields, which is a little bit scary, I should imagine, when you're on board. But, you know, with no regulatory support, some airlines have struggled even to enforce the compliance with these basic rules. So we've seen some interesting solutions. Alaska Airlines have implemented the yellow card for people that break the rules. So that was quite interesting for soccer fans. You know, we're boarding planes in new ways. We're looking at contactless payment, biometric technology to reduce the touch points. We've taken away the trolley service and the in-flight magazines. So which of these things are really making a difference? Which ones are a bit pointless? Which ones should stay? And are we even going far enough? Are there more things we should be doing? So I've got some fantastic speakers here with me to talk about some of these issues. I'm quite confident to say they are three of Africa's most experienced and renowned executives, and it's my pleasure to introduce them to you. So I expect for most of you, Zuks Ramasia requires no introduction anyway. After almost 3 decades at South African Airways, including as acting CEO, Zuks has been fundamental in the development of the aviation industry in South Africa. She served as the chairperson of the Airlines Association of Southern Africa. She served on the IATA Operations Committee, and she is a director on the Board of Aviation Coordination Services. And now, quite recently, I think, Zuks is now the CEO of BARSA, which is the Board of Airline Representatives of South Africa. And this is essentially the voice of all airlines, both local and international, that are working to develop the aviation industry in the nation. So I can honestly say I don't think we could be blessed with a more experienced and educated individual to contribute to our discussion. Zuks, welcome to the session.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So another experienced hand in the world of African aviation, Joao Po Jorge, comes to us with, again, over 3 decades of industry practice. I'm feeling quite a newbie at this stage. From his background in engineering, Joao rose through the ranks to a management position at LAM Moçambique, before he took a break from the airline and worked for 18 years for Pratt & Whitney United Technologies, where he was customer service manager for Africa. So he's had the opportunity to work alongside a number of African airlines, including Air Zimbabwe, TAG, Air Afrique, Air Senegal, Ethiopian Airlines, the list goes on. So now he's back at LAM and is the airline's Director General, leveraging his leadership skills to drive the industry understanding and success in his home carrier. Joao, it's a real pleasure to have you along.
Thank you, Joanna.
Thank you. And our third, last but not least, of course, is a familiar face in African aviation for sure. Sean Mendis was Chief Operating Officer at Africa World Airlines at its conception, and he holds the same role again today. So aside from his great work at AWA, Sean has been involved in a variety of other aspects of African aviation. He was part of the launch management team at Ghana International Airlines. He managed Mogadishu's Aden Abdullah International Airport, and he helped launch multiple aviation business lines for SKA, including a jet fuel terminal in the UAE and a cargo airline based in Uganda. And I think we can honestly say, Sean, you're a self-certified AV geek, an international leader, and a man you should definitely never go up against in an aviation pub quiz. Sean, it's good to see you today.
Thank you.
So the topic of our session is, this is all about the new normal African airline experience. So how airlines have adapted their operations and which elements are really here to stay. So looking back at where we've come from, in mid to late March, most of us stopped flying, didn't we? And kind of remained on the ground until the end of April. And then at the beginning of May, Ghana became the first African nation to really resume flight services. And Sean, your airline, Africa World Airlines, was almost the guinea pig, if you like, weren't you? You were one of the first to really take off. And I know IATA's been watching very closely to see how things have been going from your end. Do you just want to run us through some of the protocols that your airline has implemented to kind of restore that passenger confidence and keep them safe?
No, certainly, thanks. As you mentioned, Ghana was the first country in Africa and the second in the world after Vietnam to restart operations after suspending operations due to COVID. So there are a lot of countries which continue to operate throughout and, adjusted protocols on the fly. But in terms of those that shut down and then restarted, Ghana was the first in Africa. So as towards the end of April, when this was beginning, we engaged with IATA, with the regulator over here, Ghana Civil Aviation Authority, with the airport company, with the local Ghana Health Service, obviously, because they're leading the national response. And it was obvious that we needed to come up with some sort of protocols to be able to operate safely in the new normal environment. And we're very lucky that Ghana's aviation industry is large enough to not be insignificant, but small enough that people can work well together. So basically the domestic airlines and all the stakeholders, we actually at AWA, we had started our protocols way back in January when COVID began to become more of a global issue. We had developed our graduated protocols and had already been implementing things like temperature checks and mask usage and things before any shutdown was something that was voluntary from our side. So we already had a framework which we tabled then as a discussion point and worked with everyone to create effectively what was a end-to-end experience. So effectively from the moment you enter the airport terminal to when you exit the airport terminal at the other side, some agency or some entity has responsibility for every part of that experience and ensures that effectively you are safe, or at least as safe as you can be through that. So for example, when you enter the terminal, at the entrance to each of the domestic terminals, there are personnel from Ghana Health Service, and their role is to do thermal screening, so temperature checks, and to verify that you're complying with the national regulation on wearing an appropriate type of mask. So if you're wearing, if you're wearing an inappropriate mask, they will guide you how to wear the mask properly, so forth. And so there are medical personnel on hand to deal with that. Beyond that, then the airports company provides sanitizer at the entrance to the terminal and at various touch points in the terminal. You come up to the check-in counters where the airlines now have introduced contactless check-ins. So in its most basic form, it's rather than hand over your IDs for check-in or similar, you're holding it up to the person. We ensure that there is no cross-contamination. So all our stuff between every passenger. So when a passenger comes in, you hand over, you show your IDs, they print the boarding passes, they tag your bags, and before handling the next passenger any documentation or any baggage from them, they have to sanitize their hands and so forth. So there's no cross-contamination again in that process. The passenger then proceeds to security. At security, again, it's the airport company's AVSEC division, where again there's no contact, so there are no pat downs anymore. If there's a necessity for something, they use it with the wands, which again have a plastic covering on them, which is disposable and removable. The trays which the hand baggage goes into are sprayed with the bleach solution. I think they're using bleach or ethyl alcohol. I'm not sure what they're currently using, but basically the disinfectant solution between every use. So before they're returned to the other side, they are cleaned out. So passengers proceed through there. Again, the waiting area at all the gate holes have socially distanced seating. So every alternate seat is blocked off. Same thing in the cafeterias, in the concessions over there. At boarding time, again, we do contactless boarding. So from the most basic perspective, rather than you hand over your boarding pass, we tear it, you tear your own boarding pass and you put it on the table, and then they check it and let you go through. There's sanitization then just before boarding the aircraft. And that is a mandatory for all people. You can either use the sanitizer we provide or you carry your own. I forgot to mention that one of the mandatory regulations is all passengers on domestic flights must have a personal sized bottle of sanitizer. So our Civil Aviation Authority has worked with us, worked with everyone to issue a waiver on the 100 milliliter liquid restriction to permit hand sanitizer up to 500 ml initially for a 3-month period, and presumably that will be extended soon. So from a DG perspective, all this was put in place on 30th of April before the start of operations on 1st of May. So everyone is there. We are not permitted. Fortunately, the longest domestic flights here in Ghana are just about an hour and a half. So we're not permitted to do any service on board, and passengers are not allowed to bring food or drink of their own on board. This is to ensure that the masks are worn completely.
Yeah.
One of the things which we've had to do is amend our safety demos, because obviously with mandatory mask usage, we've had to change the protocols on how to put on an oxygen mask. So now there is a thing that before using the mask, the mask will fall from the overhead compartment. Before using the mask, remove your mask, pull it downwards, cover your nose and mouth, and breathe normally. So small things like that have had to be changed. The crew again have a contactless experience with passengers, as the so-called service there isn't any contact with them on board during the flight. Similarly, there's distancing during disembarkation, although that doesn't really go that well because everyone still wants to get off.
Yeah.
But it's supposed to be you move forward by rows and so forth.
Right.
After every flight sector, we have to engage in a full disinfection of the cabin. And this is something we're very proud of, because our teams have worked on this to streamline the process as well, that we can now do an entire aircraft in 7 minutes. And this is, again, using an approved cleaning to disinfection solution with a checklist that involves all high contact surfaces. So all side walls, windows, tray tables, front and back, seatbelt buckles, armrests, overhead bin locker handles, and basically any there's lavatory checks. There's a whole range of checklist over there which they have to go through, and this is done after every single flight sector. Also, we don't assign 2 adults in adjacent seats, so effectively you will always have an empty seat next to you unless you're traveling with a child or with a medical attendant. So there are a few exceptions in that case. Okay. And we change our headrest covers, and everything is changed after every single sector rather than after every rotation or after every day in some cases. And so it is a very comprehensive cleaning protocol that is put in place. On the checked baggage side, we disinfect all checked luggage after check-in before loading it onto the aircraft. And we again disinfect the checked luggage before returning it to the passengers. And while that has limited utility, obviously, again, it's something which we've done and which we agreed all of the stakeholders to do to just basically boost passenger confidence, that you're not worried what's happened to my bag. Because even if anything's happened to it, you're seeing it being sprayed and you can pick it up and be confident enough that when you walk out of the airport terminal, it's done. So basically, all the way from when you arrive at the airport terminal to when you arrive at the destination. And again, at each destination airport, before you enter the terminal, the local health authorities are doing the checks on passengers arriving as well as the passengers entering the terminal. So, it depends at each airport. Like in Accra, they're doing it at baggage claim. And other places, they're doing it as you're entering the terminal. So it depends on the terminal geography and so forth. But basically, as you're arriving, you're being checked in all the locations. And as you exit, then we wish you well and thank you for choosing air travel.
Fantastic. And it sounds like, that 7-minute turnaround for cleaning an entire aircraft is really impressive. So,
well, they have small planes.
I do appreciate that, but they're not that small. I would struggle to clean my desk in 7 minutes. So I think that's really, really good to hear. And I think it sounds like there's been an awful lot of collaboration between yourself and the airports and the health authority. So, that's really great to hear about. And we'll come back to partnerships a little bit more shortly. Joao, you're our other airline operator here. Is this largely in line with what your experience has been too?
Yes, Joanna, thank you very much indeed. Basically what Sean said is what we've been doing. Maybe some additional or some differences that I'll mention. I made some notes here. One of the basic pillars we are doing is to try and convince our staff and our crew that it is safe to fly. Because, of course, the phenomenon with this virus is that it created a lot of emotion, a lot of anxiety, a lot of scariness about, what is this? How can it be transmitted? Oh, you get it, you're killed. So we're trying to show our crews, show our staff that it's not a killer in that sense, but we are saying, follow the rules exactly as they are. We don't encourage people to look at numbers and say, oh, numbers are increasing, etc. We're saying, look at what the rules are. And the good thing is we are by the rule type of crowd, The one thing you mentioned, I worked with some African airlines. I mean, I counted the other day, I worked closely with 42 African airlines in the past. And one thing I noticed in Africa, there's two things, is speed. When we want, we do it, and we do it fast. And we are very good at, unfortunately for many different reasons, there was this stamp across the operators. It's an African operator, it's not safe, not clean, etc. So the good airlines were always able to come up and say, this is what we are, and do it right, show that we do it right. And I think this will be used during this pandemic or after the virus, to say, look, here it is, what we do, we'll do it right, we'll do it quick. One thing that I must mention that we've done that was not mentioned is the MEDIFs. I don't know if you carry people under MEDIFs on the aircraft, but we now, when we get the MEDIF booked, being it a stretcher or no stretcher, we go and talk to the health institution that issued and try to understand. We're convincing the health authorities that any MEDIF passenger requires a COVID test negative. Because there's been occasions where passengers don't feel comfortable that this is happening. Also,
yeah, sure, I can understand that.
Yes. Also, one thing that we are trying to understand, and we're not doing it, but we've encouraged the health authorities, is to study, because when we identify incoming passengers, one with the virus positive test, probably you do it as well. The passengers around, about 10 or 12 passengers are tested. And we try to encourage to report this. And these passengers are followed for 2 weeks. And so far, there was no single contamination that was recorded in every flight that had contaminated passengers. This is an interesting piece of information. We do not separate the middle seat. We use all seats in the aircraft according to IATA recommendation. But of course, Sean, you have this policy, and it will be interesting to see how it goes going forward. But we don't do that. We are also serving a meal at the boarding lounge. So what we do is we provide a bag with a glass of packet of juice or water, and maybe a sandwich or a cake. Our flights are not that long. 2.5 hours is the longest flight we have domestic. But still, we think people need to have something during the flight. And what we do at the end, we go across the cabin, gloves, crew with gloves, and then the passengers throw it on this basket, on this plastic bag to avoid contamination. The thing I want to say as well, we already started ERP exercises to all kinds of contamination, like a passenger, that is coughing, a passenger that's identified as being positive, people that were, identified in the offices as well. So we are doing simulations for that, so we know what to do. And we've learned that, we think sometimes this is working, a phone number is working, it's not working at that time, or not working at all. So I think this is good to show the staff and the public that we are prepared. We've done exercises at the airport, and people start asking, "Oh, what's this?" We're saying, "Well, it's an exercise for COVID," and I think that gives some confidence to the public. We have already also created a very close relationship with the health authorities. We started by doing some apps for passengers coming in that put us together with the health authorities. So we have a team and a WhatsApp group that involves the National Director of Public Health. And that has proven to be very helpful when we have any doubts for that. And I think that gives also some confidence, because the challenge is going to be building confidence in both our crews, our staff and the public in general. Yes, and to end the sanitization, I mean, it's great, and maybe we need to talk, Sean, 7 minutes of a cabin, and I'm assuming you're talking about a 100-seater, around that. But it's a very good achievement, and we probably need to learn from you, because that's where we're having some challenges of some people that take longer than others, so that delays the boarding. Also, you mentioned the boarding. You're doing it, seat row by row. We are trying to come up with a system that we start that at the boarding lounge. So from the boarding lounge, people walk to the aircraft or to the gate already aligned, and not in groups of rows, but row by row, to avoid any crossing as such. So in general terms, I mean, and in a short, this is what we are doing, Joanna, and thank you very much for this opportunity once again.
Thank you, Joao. That's really interesting. And I think, it's really fascinating to see that although largely the response from airlines has been fairly similar. We're all doing deep cleaning. A lot of airlines are mandating masks. But there are these fundamental differences as well, like Sean's blocking the middle seat, but Joao is not. Sean's not serving food, but Joao has decided to. Zuks, if we can come to you as a kind of voice of many airlines, there's obviously some variation. So should somebody be taking the lead on these measures? Should it be up to individual airlines, or should there be a government or regulator telling the airlines kind of, this needs to be across the board? What's your opinion on that?
So I think from my opinion is that airlines departing on each country must have almost the same way of doing things, procedures that are in place. That's why you have your Civil Aviation Authority to regulate you, so that you don't deviate from the norm. I know as airlines would like to compete and to have the best customer experience and stuff like that. So, but for now, I think where we are in a position where we need to do things that almost are seamless and are reassuring to the customers that, airlines are looking at our safety first before everything else. And when I'm talking about safety, I'm talking about your travel safety. So it is quite important. And I think that's the way to go. Yes, you can have the added function. For instance, in South Africa, the government has allowed the airlines not to block any seats. Okay. All seats occupancy is 100%. And why so? Because as industry captains, we went to the Minister of Transport and explained to them how the HEPA filters work and what's the importance of the HEPA filters. And he understood it and he bought into it, and now is more of the champion of it. He talks as if he's actually built or contributed it. But that's the good thing of collaboration, of working together, because you're talking with one voice together and you're saying to the minister, this is the way to go. And the minister, when the minister believes in it, then he makes a call, and that call was good for us. And one of the main things is because nationally it was about the mask that needs to be worn on board. Yeah. So our responsibility as airline, because as you know, airlines are highly regulated and are self-regulating. One of the things that airlines are doing now is to are guarding the crew and, let's say, the customer journey in the airport. That's what we're doing. Yes. You can't get into the airport without a face mask. So that's what is happening. And the good thing that the Airport Company of South Africa has done, has deployed a vending machine whereby, you can actually buy your own mask quickly. Right. So basically to ensure that you are not left behind, because errors do happen. You're not left behind. You can travel in a safe way, because you don't want other passengers to put them in angst and to make them uncomfortable. So everybody must comply, and that's what we're doing from check-in, from arrival at the airport. We make sure that it's seamless. Everybody's doing the same at the check-in counters, before boarding, waiting at the gate, access to the aircraft through the air bridge, and whether you use a bus or you are in a confined space. The main thing that you are doing now, the common protocol, is about the cleaning, disinfection and to ensure that, you know, everybody is doing the same, you know. So
Yes.
the one thing about that has done this COVID, it has made a lot of collaboration. Everybody is working towards the same goal because we all want to see the airlines airborne again. So that's what we are all seized with, and that's all what we are all, you know, channeling all our energy to ensure that we all are compliant and we're self-regulating and we're doing the best to make the customer feel at ease that these people, they're not only worried about the commercial aspect of the business, they worry about my safety as a customer. That's what we all are collaborating on.
That's fantastic. And I think that's something that we're seeing replicated all around the world, is this closer collaboration of airlines, airports, health authorities, regulators. But particularly in Europe, it's been very much on kind of a country by country basis. And I guess you're kind of looking from a South Africa perspective. Do you see it being more of a challenge when it opens up to the international market? Are you going to get the same sort of cooperation from airports elsewhere in the world to ensure that people are arriving wearing their masks, that are arriving having had their temperature checked, or, you know, in compliance with South African airport regulations? Do you see that as a future challenge, perhaps?
Not at all. So one thing about airlines or aviation, we are all, even pre-COVID, there's one thing that the airlines have mastered, because airlines have lived through the strains of H1N1, the Zika, the Ebola, the SARS and stuff like that. So it has become part of our DNA to deal with these issues. So what happens is the notice will go out, whether is in terms of, there'll be notice that going to various airlines that in South Africa, this is what is required. So it means that at the airport of departure, everybody knows already that this is the way the NOTAM has come in and this is how we do things. So therefore, the staff at the airport and the staff, the airline staff will all, make sure that they adhere to the NOTAM of the country that you're flying into. So, but what I'm seeing right now, I'm seeing all airlines or aviation community coordinating and trying to make sure that we are all deploying the same processes. Yes, there will be a difference here and there, but in most cases, really, it is all about taking care of your staff, taking care of your passengers, taking care of the people of the country that you're going to and the country that you're coming from. So really, I must say that passenger safety is key. And if you remember from 911, we were worried about the security at that point in time.
Yes.
And we have residual of that you are still maintaining. And that's what is going to happen now.
Yes.
So all what we are putting in place now is what we may have to live with, because it looks like we don't know when the virus is going to be conquered or when, but what is important is that what we are doing now is something that must make the customers feel, there must be advocacy group for us and say, you know what, these people, they care about us. So therefore, they must talk on behalf of us, the customers. They must be the one who feel comfortable to tell others that, you know what, I traveled these days, and when I traveled from when I got into the airport, when I was in the aircraft, and when I landed, everything, I could see that these people took all precautionary measures to look after me as a customer. So that's what we are seized with.
Definitely. And I think, communicating that to the customers and letting them know before they even consider booking their flight that all these things are in place, that's one of our biggest challenges right now. And I think, Sean, if I can come back to you briefly, I don't want to get too hung up on the middle seat issue, because we could talk for an hour about the middle seat. But what we have seen is that airlines, particularly airlines in the US that have chosen to block the middle seat, the ones that have blocked it for a while and are now not blocking it are dealing with a real PR nightmare. I'm looking at American and United in particular. They've gone from having that middle seat blocked to allowing people to sit there. And there's been pictures up on social media of packed airplanes and people saying, American Airlines doesn't care about me anymore. Obviously, you're going to need an exit strategy. I'm presuming that you cannot operate your flights at 64% capacity forever. So when are you going to start selling those seats, and how are you going to deal with the opinions of the people who are getting used to not having somebody sitting next to them?
To be honest, we actually have more complaints from people who can't sit next to their travel companions than we do about, in any other respect, because it other than with a child, we are not permitted, as per our regulator, to assign on domestic flights adjacent seats to 2 adults. So I actually expect, if we're able to liberalize it in a progressive manner, as in people traveling together on the same reservation and so forth, will then be allowed, and then progressively loosen it as people get more and more used to it. We'll see how that pans out. My expectation is, in Ghana, the mask usage has been made mandatory, and with the other protocols we have already put in place, such as mandatory sanitization, disinfection of baggage, and so forth, the risks within the air travel bubble is going to be minimized significantly. So I think I don't expect to see a passenger backlash on that.
Good.
But as I said, it's how it's done, when it's done, and how we pitch it to the public is going to be a big issue.
Absolutely, I completely agree there. Moving on to really what the passengers are looking at, I think we can all agree that the message is to, like Zuks says, to ensure the passengers know we're doing everything to keep them safe. So do you see that there's going to be a shift in passenger expectations? Will cleanliness and hygiene become a competitive issue for airlines? I'm not talking about just in Africa, but all over the world. Will, passengers start looking at the hygiene policies of airlines like they look at the differences in fare prices or the quality of the seats or the food? And I wonder what the messages are we're getting right now from our passengers about what's important and what's not. Joao, have you gone into any sort of feedback with your passengers about how they're receiving what you're doing so far, whether you think it's enough, what their opinions of your efforts so far are?
Yes, indeed. We are extremely worried, with the perception of passengers. Like I mentioned at the beginning, I think that's going to be the key success to our progress, in exiting this COVID. So we have people, we have dedicated staff that are at boarding, check-in, and are constantly getting the feedback, and of course understanding the passengers that are more at like more showing more worrying signals, and talking to them, what's the problem, what do you feel? We encourage people to rethink about traveling. If they're not comfortable, we don't want them to travel, and kind of do a contagion to other passengers of their feeling, of their mood. So we are working with actually some counselors to see what must we do, how must we read these people, how must we do with them, because it's a little bit going back to those old times of fear of flight. It's coming back for a reason. So we're trying to do the same approach, kind of comfort them. And in some cases we tell, if you're not comfortable, come, we will rebook you, think about it if you can. In most cases, people are open to, go, and we explain to them. We avoid getting in too much details of this HEPA filters and, stuff that looks like it's like an excuse to do it. We refer to it, but we don't concentrate on that. We just say, look, the indications we have are that people are not getting the virus through traveling. It's not on board. You have to be careful, everywhere you are. Luckily, we have got some good data from our health services about, the markets being the biggest contagion areas in terms of percentage. Actually, funny enough, even in public ground transportation, it's lower than in markets. And then, of course, in airplanes, like we said, we have no indication so far of a single flight where people got contaminated on board. So that's our kind of approach to this. We have a lot of IATA recommendations and to passengers, etc. So we're extracting from that as well, and AXA as well in South Africa, that is producing a lot of stuff that we're using to help these passengers.
Brilliant. Thank you, Joao. Sean, I know you've done a bit of work in sort of surveying what's important to your passengers. Can you give us a quick sort of rundown of what feedback you're getting, what measures they find are the most important?
Yeah, one of the key things we did again at the beginning of the pandemic was we worked out a full communication strategy to try and get the message across. So that is our Fly Safe, Fly Confident program, hashtag Fly Safe, Fly Confident. So we've had a range of communications which went out initially on the importance of sanitizing your hands, the importance, for example, as Joao said, of in the initial stages, do not travel if you're not feeling well. Now, of course, it's stay at home if you're not feeling well. So it's developed from there. As I look at some of the early ones, it's wash your hands regularly. Now it's always wear a mask. So it has moved on from through that period. But we've also interacted with passengers, with our frequent flyers, as well as with random passengers at the airport. I try to take a flight at least once a week and talk to passengers myself, just to get a general idea on where that is. But I think the main thing has been that passengers are not pushing back against the measures. They feel rather comforted by the measures rather than that. And as Joao said, you don't have to necessarily give them technicalities about HIPAA filters, 99% effective, and so forth. You just need to be able to show them that, look, we know what we are doing, and you can see that we're doing something. And they're already putting their lives in your hands by buying a ticket to fly with you all. If they didn't trust your ability to assess this risk and manage it well, they wouldn't have been flying with you anyway. And African passengers in particular always rate safety as one of their top reasons for choosing an airline. So we've already got their confidence. We just need to reiterate and reinforce that to them for that front. And something which I've said, elsewhere has been that the one thing which I like from a cost perspective, at least, has been that the focus has moved away from necessarily providing them more food and drink and so forth, and rather than the same passenger who previously would be more focused upon what snack and what drink am I getting on my 40-minute flight is now more concerned about when was the last time you cleaned the plane, how did you clean it, and what are you doing in that respect. So certainly, while we've got additional costs in PPE and cleaning costs and things as such, we're realizing part of those savings on the other side. And as Joao said, while they're giving away free meals in the departure lounge, we've got a partnership with a local coffee shop chain, Vida Cafe, where you can now pre-purchase discounted vouchers for purchase at their airport outlets via our website. So you get it at check-in. As part of the contactless check-in, and collect your drink and sandwich or whatever you ordered in advance from their airport outlet and consume it before you board rather than that. So we've taken more of the, if you like it, you can buy it. I think he's more generous than that I am on that.
Absolutely. I think it's really interesting to watch the shifting perceptions from passengers. Like you say, one who might have chosen an airline based on whether it serves Coke or Pepsi may now be looking at whether it gives a free mask or a hand sanitizer, but
if I could just add on that, and that's one thing which I found interesting, is that our health regulator has actually forbidden us from handing out PPE. Because they believe that there's more risk in cross-contamination from an airline handing out PPE than for someone to actually bring the PPE. So we are not permitted to sell. We're not permitted to, that is for masks and gloves or anything else. In fact, our staff are not permitted to wear gloves because of risk of cross-contamination. And their biggest risk and focus has been on cross-contamination. However, our little individual hand sanitizers has become one of our best-selling ancillaries.
Amazing.
So,
amazing. And does that offset what you're not making on selling sandwiches on board, would you say?
Honestly, we never sold sandwiches before. We had the partnership, so we made peanuts on that, and we're selling these at cost. So I think we make approximately 3 US cents per piece we sell, and that is more than covered off in the logistics of getting them to the ticket offices.
Absolutely. So a good deed, really. I think if we look back at previous crises, 9/11 fundamentally changed the way we get on planes, and we accepted that, the increased security measures. We now accept our limit for liquids and the clear bags for all our toiletries. So, this is really where we're going with this conversation, and I'm conscious we're getting close to the end of our session. But so what do we really think is going to stay long term? What is going to be the next clear plastic bag, if you like? Zuks, you've got a great overview of the industry in general. Which of the measures do you think will persist long after COVID, and which ones do you think will be kind of slipping away in the longer term?
Well, from where I'm standing, if you look at COVID-19, number one, we do not know how long will it be.
No.
So for the longest time, we're going to deal with the sanitization to make sure that, I think, Sean, they're even selling it on board, but it will be part of our DNA, to ensure that the washing of hands is part of what we're doing, the mask, will keep them. I mean, if you remember when China was dealing with SARS outbreak and all that, for the longest time, when you go to China, they've been wearing those masks, long after us as travelers that get into China had stopped, because we thought, I mean, they've managed, the strain has surpassed. But right now, from where I'm standing, we need to coexist with this strain, because it doesn't look like it's leaving us anytime soon. So from where I'm standing, I see us doing the sanitization. I see us cleaning and extra measures of cleaning that happens. And I think Sean mentioned that passengers will not worry now about the menu on board than worrying about how do we clean the surfaces, their tray tables, their headrests, and all that. That's what will be preoccupied on the passengers. And you'll see on our Twitter handle and everything else, people will be tweeting about, you know what, I was on this flight and I'm thinking the headdress hasn't changed. It's the same headdress. So it's about the safety and the cleanliness of the cabin that is going to stay with us. And of course, I think more countries will start ensuring that the new generation aircraft that has got HEPA filters are more the ones that are allowed in. Then they will be saying to the old aircraft, do something about HEPA filters and put them in your system. But yeah, in the main, I'm thinking that cleanliness is the way to go.
Brilliant, thank you. And in terms of the COVID testing, and if a vaccination comes out, where do you see that fitting into everything? I mean, do you think there will be widespread testing prior to flights, particularly international flights, I'm thinking? And if there is a vaccine, will we be carrying, immunity passports or some sort of identifier so that our airlines know that we're safe?
Certainly. I think for the next 2 years, that will be the passport for you to travel, because, I mean, I think one of the things, even as airlines themselves, I think no airlines wants to be known that they're the ones who transmitted or brought in people who are sick on board. So that's why there's pre-screening that happens at the airport, and that's part of the collaboration. But however, I think a health certificate will be one of the things that will be required for the longest time, to have it. It will be part of our normal part and parcel. When we have visas, that will be your visa to travel going forward. And I think it will stay with us for the longest time possible.
Absolutely. Joao, your video's gone off, but I'm assuming you're still with us. I wanted to ask, we've had somebody ask in the questions about if there's been any dispensation given to people with medical conditions that can't wear face masks. And I know this is a major issue here in Europe at the moment. How do you prove that you can't wear a mask, or that, you've got some sort of medical condition? Are you having to deal with that at the moment as an airline?
Yes, Joanna, we have had issues, and I mentioned in my introduction that we transport people on stretchers, and some of them are with health support, etc. So we are very careful when we do the booking that we make clear that they have to wear a mask. It's not an option. And usually the medical teams, have like maybe a different type of mask that allows them to breathe, allows them to have the tube, whatever inside, but still protect them from issuing or broadcasting the droplets to the environment. And that's been working so far, so good. Again, we worry a lot about passengers around and passengers boarding and deboarding, and we don't want to throw any element of lack of confidence.
Absolutely. Well, that's been a great discussion. I have to say, I see John's popped up, which means we're out of time. But thank you to everybody who joined in, and thank you for all your questions. Sean, you've been great at answering a lot of the questions in the chat live. But if you haven't had a chance to have your question answered, then please do follow up with our speakers. You know, you can connect with them on LinkedIn